So we saw wide-ranging performance in 2019. What accounted for that? I mean, what do we observe in terms of the successes and failures from 2019?
It was an incredible year for growth and expansion. You know, we saw just a huge increase in the number of acres planted. And I think what we saw was really something that's always been true about farming. It's a risky business. It's a complex equation with multiple variables.
Talk to us about field prep.
Well, field prep is really important to guaranteeing the success or the potential for success of your crop. So understanding your soil type and doing practices that will improve your soil as you go into the crop season are really important. Hemp does not like wet feet. So planting in low areas and poorly drained soil is just going to be a recipe for disaster no matter how great your genetics are. You should have an irrigation plan for sure. So you've got to decide if you're going to use drip irrigation, if you're going to use overhead through a pivot type system for irrigation. We had farmers that tended in some cases to overwater early and not allow that wet dry cycle.
And Ray, how do planting techniques figure into this?
Well, again, as part of your crop plan, you need to already have decided well before your plants arrive exactly how you're going to plant them. You can be planting by hand if it's a smaller scale, or even large scale you can plant by hand, but you need to have enough labor available. There's several different types of mechanical transplanters out on the market that also work quite well. If you're in a humid climate and you're growing in an area that is prone to high humidity, then you want to increase your crop spacing so you'll have better airflow in there, which is your first line of defense of disease prevention. Scouting for insects and learning what insects and pests that could harm the plant and having some preventative measures, whether it's biocontrols or soaps and oils, different things that you can apply early in the crop cycle to keep a clean crop is going to pay dividends towards the end.
How do I know when to harvest?
If you're looking for low THC, then the way to determine that is by testing your plant along the way and making sure that you harvest before it gets to that critical threshold, right? So that threshold has been defined as 0.3% by the federal government. And it's important to also understand that there's a turnaround time. So from the time you take that plant sample, you send it to a compliance laboratory, you get that information back, right? So you have to have your plan in place so that you're doing these testings regularly so that you don't come up with a surprise. So you don't want to test and find that it's at 0.29 and not have a harvest plan in place. Successes and failures that we saw in 2019, I think were in part due to the genetics, right? So if you take the same genetics and you grow it in different regions, you're going to see that the results are different. And so an important consideration is, are you growing the right genetics in the right region? I think the other thing that we saw as successes and failures were as new varieties came out, we saw that there was a large amount of variability in some of the new varieties that were available, even within the same field.
How would you know which genetics are best for which region?
Farm Range has an extensive field testing program where we put our varieties in a number of different regions around the United States so that we can monitor that performance and determine whether or not we will have success in those regions.
We've touched on just a few of the variables here, and it's really about your region, which is going to dictate your soil types and the climate and the types of weather patterns that you see. And that's certainly going to play a role with the type of genetics or the variety selection that you use. And it's really important that growers keep in mind how they plan to monetize it so they don't either grow too much or they don't grow the wrong type of plant based on how they want to sell their crop and take it to the marketplace. There's a lot of different ways to farm this crop successfully. There is no one right way, and I think that's true of lots of crops and farming in general, and it's certainly no different in hemp.
The number one thing that led to success was paying really close attention and being out there and planning on being out there on a daily basis during the crop cycle.